So Mandy's an international entertainer.
Yeah.
Many of you saw her on America's Got Talent. She got up on the stage in her stocking feet
Yeah.
and she sang beautifully. And she got the fireworks, and
Yeah,
she's
the
going to tell you
golden
about that a little
buzzer.
bit.
Yeah.
So what we'd like to do is just ask you a few questions about some of the experiences you've had. What was life like when you were originally growing up? Actually, Mandy was born in Cincinnati. I found that out
Yeah.
last night.
Go Buckeyes.
Go Buckeyes.
Woo! No, growing up, I was a relatively shy, awkward child. I've never been one to be overly like, hey, look at me. I was one of four kids, and I was the middle child somewhere in there, and so it was more like, hey, don't look at me. But I was always hard of hearing, and so lip reading was a part of my life, but it also was very difficult because you don't always understand what's happening. And as a person who doesn't want to draw attention to myself, answering the wrong question was definitely top on the list. So I just avoided conversations as much as possible. And then my mom put me in a choir class, and I fell in love. It was one of those amazing experiences where everyone in the room, regardless of their background, how much money they have, color of their skin, their abilities or disabilities, whatever, we were all working together as a team to create something beautiful. And selfishly, all of the words were in black and white, so I didn't have to guess the conversation. And I fell in love with it. Fell in love.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Well, in your late teens, you were going to school for music, and then you started to
Yeah.
lose your hearing.
Yeah.
What were you feeling during that time, and when you realized that your greatest fear was actually happening?
It's interesting looking back on it because when I was young, being slightly hard of hearing, the biggest fear that you can have as a musician, I think, is becoming profoundly deaf and losing that sense, because you feel that without being able to hear, you disconnect from your love, from your passion. And when I was a senior in high school, I was walking in PE class and I dislocated my leg at the knee by walking. And I ended up having 6 major surgeries in about a year and a half during the same time that I was losing my hearing. They're connected because I was having adverse reactions to medications and anesthesia and everything like that. I wasn't responding well, so they just kept dumping more in. At one point, my anesthesiologist was saying that I had had more medication than any open heart surgery on record in the state of Colorado, for my first procedure. And I was still talking to him. And I remember having conversations. I was like, why are you moving my IV? And he was just like, ah! Probably that was like a glaring red flag, but we just didn't pay attention to that. We didn't have the education behind to know, oh, you have a lot of indicators of EDS. Maybe we should approach things differently. So when I was in school for vocal music education, it was in the middle of this storm. And I was 18 years old, high hormones, high change of your body and yourself, extraordinary stress situation of doing all of these surgeries and trying to jump into your first year of study and the pressure and being in a wheelchair and then learning how to walk again while all of this is happening, and it took a toll on my body. So it's an interesting question because at first, honestly, I was just trying to survive. It wasn't until a little bit later when I realized that I wasn't accepted in classes anymore and I was dropped from the program that I actually became upset about my hearing loss at all. It was just more another thing to deal with, another thing to handle. And when you have issues with your body all the time, I've had surgeries and issues my entire life. We just never understood the connection between them. You just get used to well, today is going to be an interesting day. We'll figure it out as we go along, and hopefully it will be better tomorrow kind of vibe. But to say that it was devastating and heartbreaking would be putting it very lightly. But in the experience, I have grown so much, and I have learned to love music so much more, and I don't judge myself the way that I used to. It's given me a lot of freedom at the end of it. It's given me a lot of answers to a lot of questions. I figured out that I did have EDS, and then it opened up that community for me, and it gave me ways to be introduced to other people with EDS, so I didn't feel like I was just crazy. And getting connected in with the deaf community, it opened up that communication of not having to just lip read, but to have a communication that was easy and comfortable, and to be with other people again who weren't just crazy. And then to be able to sing without being able to hear myself allowed me to sing without being able to judge myself and criticize myself all the time. And so now I sing freely.
Yes.
And
yes.
so the whole journey has been well worth it in its own way.
Yes, yes. But initially you were in depression.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Initially, I was just a basket case of problems.
And confined to your room.
I did. I actually, you get to a point where you start doing odd things. They make sense to you at the time, but the behavior from the outside is like, yeesh. Figuring out how many steps would it actually take for me to get up and go to the bathroom. That's too many. I'm just going to sit here until I can't, hold it anymore. And maybe I'll fall back asleep and it'll just go away. Stuff like that. Having internal debates with yourself constantly. I remember the first time that I went outside into the sun, and I was just like, how angry I was that the sun was shining. You become a different person.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, your father was always there for you.
Yeah.
And I think many in the room, and I can too, I have 2 daughters and my wife previously, a grandson, all have EDS.
Yeah.
And I know many of us are caregivers, and it's really fantastic that your father has been with you.
Yeah.
Now, tell us more. What did he say to you? How did he help along the way?
My dad and my mom, my entire family really has been such a huge supporter of my life, and I know that that's rare. I just know that it is. I've met a lot of people who've lost their hearing, and I know a lot of people whose families don't ever learn sign language. I know people who struggle with medical conditions, and I know that it puts strains on relationships. We're all aware. But when you find those people who, it really just doesn't matter. They just love you. It really changes your outlook on life. And I've had so many important conversations with my dad and my mom alike. And one of those important conversations with my dad, we were sitting in a van together, and we were trying to make sense of the world. And my dad said that the world is indifferent to you, which is true. The world is not going to change for me. It doesn't care about me. The world is the world. It's going to keep turning. But it's not my job to be mad at the world for continuing forward when I get stuck. It's my job to move forward on my own way, to stay on the path, to gain internal motivation, and to make change happen, because the world's not just going to change. We have to be the force that causes change. We have to spark it, or else it just will keep turning.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you and your dad interact to get you back into the music?
Oh, man. Well, he was dealing with his own things at the time, and so music and communication for us kind of broke down. And so he asked me to play guitar with him. And I thought it was really kind of a silly request. It's like, oh, fine. Your dad, I love you, I guess. So I said yes, and I was just watching the chords, and I was playing the guitar with him, and started to pay attention to the vibrations that the instrument had on my fingertips. And as I was holding the instrument against my skin, I could feel it, and it just sparked something in me that just because the music isn't the same, it doesn't mean that it died. It's still there. I'm just not paying attention to it. And I can appreciate it in a different way. And so it sparked a journey of relearning how to perform and relearning how to love music without being able to hear. And it's been one of the most beautiful journeys of my life.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah.
So now there's a new chapter.
Yeah.
And how did you get involved with America's Got Talent?
You know, I never wanted to be. Initially, it was crazy. I was performing a lot, and I was seen by one of the producers. They were at one of my shows, and they said, "Well, hey, have you ever thought about auditioning for the show?" And I told them I didn't know that they were a producer for the show. I said, "No. Yeah, reality TV is for weird people." Like, that's some sort of abuse that I was not prepared for. But they said, "Well, if you ever think about it, you change your mind, let us know." And so I went back home, and I started having discussions with my dad and with my team and the people who know me the best. And they asked me very straightforward, "What do you want to do with your life?" I'm like, oh gosh, that's a big question. What do I want to do with my life? I want to encourage people. I want to show a different side of what a disability looks like, to highlight all of the invisible ones, and to say that we judge each other so quickly instead of encouraging each other. I want to make people smile, and I want to show that it is okay to fail, that you can be a completely devastated mush of a person, and you can still make a huge positive impact. Even when you don't think that you are in that moment, you still are making a beautiful impact.
Yeah.
And so they said, "Well, why not?" And I was like, "'Cause it's terrifying, and I have a history of throwing up when I get nervous, and I'm pretty sure that's not what Simon's talent is, seeking is, But there are probably a lot of people who would pay me a lot of good money to vomit on Simon Cowell on national television, so worst cases."
So here you are
Yeah.
on the stage in your stocking
Yeah.
feet, and
I know.
what was happening there?
Well, so that's how I stay grounded and keep in time with the other musicians. But I'd never seen the show before. And there was 5,000 people in the audience. I had bronchitis, and I was nervous. And Dad and I never talked about winning. We never talked about getting a golden buzzer. We had only talked about keeping focus on why we showed up in the first place. All we wanted to do was encourage one person. If we can encourage one person to maybe learn to love themselves a little bit more, or to have just a little bit of hope through that day, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we get X'd off. It doesn't matter if I vomit on stage. It doesn't matter. I showed up, and that's the hardest part. And so I started singing a song that I wrote called Try, and it was overwhelming, the response that was happening in the audience. And they were screaming so loud that they were messing with the vibrations of the stage. I was actually quite frustrated. I was like, shh. In my head, I was like, shh, I can't feel the band. So there's the part where I started giggling when they all stood up. It wasn't because they stood up and they were screaming, but they were all standing at the same time, so the whole stage shook.
Yes.
And so in my head, I was like, I just went rogue. And I was like, well, I hope that the band can hear me, because, wow, here we go. We're going for it.
And what did Simon say before the program?
Well, so they tested the red X's right before I walked on stage, which was not a fair thing to do. That's rude. They did it for me because I was an adult and they had a bunch of children, and they were like, it'll scare you less. I'm sorry. I've never seen the show before, and the entire stage shakes and turns red. I thought there like a fire alarm had gone off. I was the most nervous. And then when they tested out the golden buzzer, because it was the first day of filming, it was broken. It didn't work. And Simon Cowell stood up on his chair and he said, I don't care if this stupid button doesn't work. I'm not pushing it the first day of filming. Not gonna happen. And then I just walked out on stage. And yeah, I was like, well, I'm going home, guys. It's all good. One person. We just gotta focus on the one person. And some really beautiful things came out of it. Some truly beautiful things came out of it. I got to stand on national television and say that I lost my hearing because I have a connective tissue disorder. And I got to have my video be seen over 500 million times. We got to introduce sign language for the first time on that stage, closed captioning in the green room. We had a video in silence. It's the longest period of silence on network television history.
Wow.
And we got to show an interpreter on stage for everyone to see, because there's nothing wrong with needing help. There's nothing wrong with being different. And there's nothing wrong with being a little broken. And I never want to show that I need to appear normal. I'm very aware that I'm weird. I've accepted it. I'm happy with it. And I'm learning to love myself with it.
Wow.
So I'm proud of the work that I did on AGT, and hopefully I'll get to, pop my head in from time to time and continue that family friendship that I have with them.
Now, you've been traveling a lot.
A lot, yeah.
A lot is.
Yeah.
Where were you last, and where are you going next?
That's always the hardest question. I know where I am. Let's see.
You're on the West Coast.
Yeah, I was in New York doing recording for my album, and then I went to Ohio, different place of Ohio, Cleveland.
Yes.
For the FFA, and then I flew to California, and then did recording there, then went to Seattle, then to Canada, then home for one day, and then here, and then tomorrow I go home before we go to Denmark.
Wow.
So, yeah, we're having fun. It's just, I tell you what, if there's one thing that is a little cumbersome when you have slight oddities with yourself, it's got to be flying. Flying is hardcore, but I'm learning a lot about different kinds of compression and movement and stuff to help maintain my body on those things.
Yeah. Now, you've said a number of people have approached you that say, I have EDS too.
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
Well, first I always go zebras. I wear stripes of some variety almost every day, and it's not because I'm obsessed with stripes, because I am, but that's just a side note. I have a very large awareness that every day is a little bit of a challenge, and I have to attack every day because the world is indifferent. I'm aware that the world is indifferent. I'm the one who's going to spark change in myself. And so even though I'm in pain all day and things dislocate and move, and it's going to be a weird one, you never know what's going to happen, I wear stripes to remind myself that I'm not alone, and to remind myself that I got to go slower sometimes, and that's okay. And so when I go and I have shows and I wear stripes, and then people come up to me and they say, oh, I have EDS, and go zebras, and then they'll show their shirt and they're also wearing stripes, and we just know that we don't have to talk about it. We both understand each other. Even though our stripes are different and the things that we're struggling with are different, we're both doing our best to live a meaningful, purposeful life with the cards that we have. And it's always a beautiful thing to be surrounded by people who want to work hard, not just for themselves, but to spark change for other people.
Yeah. And we got a lot of them in the room right now.
Yeah, I can tell.
We're really appreciative to have them.
I could tell. I'm digging it. I'm digging the stripes. Yeah.
Well, we're going to have an opportunity to have Mandy back 2 more times. She's coming back for the panel discussion. We're going to have a couple more questions to learn a little bit more about Mandy and some of the programs that she's been involved with, some of the organizations that she's been involved with to help people that are have this invisible diseases that we call. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll also have her back for an entertainment program as well. So tell us a little bit more about what you feel the EDS community needs. What are the things that we really need to be focusing on? We are a community that are collaborating with one another, and we'd really love to get your opinion as about what else could we do?
Oh gosh. I think with anything there's always more to do. And I think any person who settles to say that we've got it all figured out is fooling themselves. Yeah. But I really do feel that because it's such a untalked about disorder, and it affects every aspect of your life and every aspect of your internal self. You know, it's just like sometimes your organs shift and move around just because they want to go on a party on a different place. You know, I feel that it would be important for us to continue to talk about it, continue to spread awareness, and continue to build community, because for the longest time in my life, and for a lot of the people that I've been interacting with, there's this overwhelming sense of confusion, fear, and feeling crazy. And then when you see a doctor, then they just try to treat one symptom for one area of your body, and then they send you to another doctor. And then that person's trying to do another thing. And then they're like, oh, well, I can't have to go to see this doctor. And then pretty soon you're seeing 15 doctors, and all of them say the same thing. Well, we don't really know what's wrong with you. You got some kind of problem. It's obvious, but we just don't know what it is. Here's some pain medication that aren't going to work. Try to sleep, and good luck to you. And as fun as that diagnosis is, again and again and again and again, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And there are so many people who could have meaningful, impactful lives and be huge members of the society that we live in if they were given the appropriate tools, and if we had found ways to be able to say, oh, blatantly obvious, we found in this place that you have EDS. Here you go. Now we're going to approach your medical as a person with EDS. And we know that it affects all of these different places. So we're only going to connect the dots with these because, you know, oh, your foot fell asleep for no reason and then your ankle popped out. Oh, that sucks. That's not good enough. You know, there has to be something to do. And if the only thing that there is to do is to have a community where you can hug each other and cry on each other's shoulders and cheer each other on, I'm okay with that as well. But it seems like for me and for so many people who come up to me in my shows, they don't have anyone. They're just crazy and whiners and a burden on their families.
Yeah.
And that's the story that gets told again and again and again. And then they're looking for people to save them. And we can save yourselves. We can save each other by just being a community and cheering each other on and finding things that work for one person and just having discussions about it and say, hey, I've been trying this. It seems to help for me. Let's see if we can find some dots to connect and really open up those doors of communication. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I just know that we're broken.
Well, we don't need to be a doctor, but
Yeah.
we do, to your point, need to share, and we need to support. We need to get to people and say, hey, I'm here to help.
Yeah.
I get it, because I either have it or I have family members that have it. And it's really important that we, as a community, help those. And with our support groups, and we talked about Facebook sites, we talked about other community collaborations, they're so important to help those people that are isolated and stranded and really looking for help.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're really pleased with having you come and tell your story. We're looking forward to
Yeah.
seeing you a little later.
Well,
And
thank
we're going
you.
to get on with
Thank
the
you for
program.
having me, guys.
So thank you very much. And we can...
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.